Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I want to talk about container tomatoes, and I want to go through sort of an overview of how you get them started, what you plant them in, and how do you take care of them when they get to this size. So this video will be a little bit longer than normal, but I think it will be worth the time to really, stay through the whole video here and learn a couple of principles that will really make a difference in your garden. First thing is minimum size for a container is a 5-gallon bucket. 1 tomato in a 5-gallon bucket. I've had success with the 5 gallons. I've moved up to bigger containers. I think they might be 7 or 9 gallons. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But they were only $4 at Big Lots. So anytime you can get a bigger container for a low price, go for it. So the bigger container, the better. You can grow indeterminate tomatoes in here. Those are tomatoes that will grow all season long. You can grow determinate tomatoes. This year, in my containers, these are 3 different determinate type varieties. This is a Kimberly, this is an orange banana, and this is a Matina. They will all get to a set height, flower, the fruit's already starting on them, and then the plant will die off and I'll replace these tomatoes with other plants. So, container soil. First thing that you want to do is you want to make sure your container soil has at least 50% organic matter. This is peat moss. So this would be 50% peat moss, you can do 50% cocoa coir, and then the other 50% can be could be compost if you want, could be topsoil, could be garden soil. You just want to make sure that at least 50% of the container is some sort of organic matter, and compost will do the trick too if you have enough. But if not, 50% peat moss. This will hold the water. That's what you're looking for. Cocoa coir, peat moss will retain water. If you don't want to go through the process of making it, you can go ahead and just get a bag of potting mix. The potting mix that you buy in stores turns out to be more expensive, but it's the same principle. It's mostly peat moss and it will retain water for you nicely. And that's what you definitely need for container tomatoes. You have to keep the moisture, because if these containers dry out once and the tomatoes go 24 hours without water, it's going to cause a real problem with the tomatoes. Now, when you first set up your soil, you want to do a couple of things. You can use any kind of fertilizer that you want. This is an organic fertilizer, and I think this was a 646. I usually in my videos say a 10-10-10. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Get as close as you can to a 10-10-10. 646 is fine. You can check out my other videos to learn what that means. But I would put, maybe 2 tablespoons of this fertilizer or the 10-10-10 right in here. Get some fertilizer in there. Also, when you start, if you're using a 5-gallon container, you want to get about 4 ounces of garden lime. Lime has calcium in it. You can just buy a bag like this. It's garden lime. It's a little more expensive this way. You can also buy the 40-gallon bags, which I think are only maybe $5 or $10 for the whole bag, but that's also lime. The lime is to put calcium in there, and you would put in 48 ounces. You could put in this whole cup. You want calcium in your soil. If you don't have enough calcium, your tomatoes can get it looks like it's a disease, but it's from not a virus or a fungus. It's from the plant not being able to actually pull the calcium out of the soil, or there is no calcium in the soil. But it's called blossom end rot, and that's when the bottom of your tomato turns brown. Let me make sure you can see it. Turns brown, and that's a calcium deficiency. So you're setting up your soil 50% organic matter. You're putting in a couple tablespoons of 10-10-10 or something close to that in a slow release fertilizer, and you're putting in some lime. That gets your plant set up. Once your soil's set up, I usually use transplants. There are 2 tomatoes here. This is really for another project, but just assume it's 1 tomato. That would go right into here. The tomato's nice and green. It's been fed. I've got fertilizer in there, and then I would use a product that's a chemical fertilizer. And there's nothing wrong with using chemical fertilizers. Don't be spooked by people that say organic's the only way to go. Organic is fine if you choose that, but your tomato plants can't tell the difference between organic fertilizer and chemical fertilizer. This product is an all-purpose plant food, and this is a 24-8-16. 24 nitrogen is a high number, but to get the plant started, just follow the directions of this package. water it in with the fertilizer, let it go. And I'll talk more about fertilizing when we get to these bigger plants. Or you could use Miracle-Gro, similar product. Some people don't like this company. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but this is a 24/8/16 liquid fertilizer too. So your plant's established now. You got everything in there. Also for watering, you want to make sure, I have a hole right here. You really want to put the holes in the bottom if you're going to use a tray like this. I actually made the mistake of putting a hole in here, which is fine because you want drainage. That's number one rule, is you don't want water sitting in your container or your plant roots will rot. So you need a drainage hole. If you put a drainage hole up here, you have to make sure that this tray will hold water above the hole or water's not going to go in. So come mid-July, like today's July 12th, I really need extra water in my garden. Put a bunch of holes in here, use a tray like this, fill it up with water, fill it up here. Your plant will be able to go at least 2 days with water. I'm going to let the jet go by. Take this out of the way. So when your plant is this small and growing in the container, you don't need to give it liquid fertilizer every 2 weeks at full strength. There's just no point to it. This plant is not using up that fertilizer. So with time, your tomatoes are going to start to grow, and you want to do, this plant's what, 1 foot to about 3 feet, a little bit taller. It's got its first fruit on there. So as it's getting bigger, you want to be feeding this a liquid fertilizer about every 2 weeks. Sometimes you might want to go every 10 days. You can go half strength. It doesn't need all that nitrogen, and I do recommend that. You want to keep the fertilizer balance. Again, this is a 24/8/16. Cut it in half, just follow half the recipe. That would be a 12/4/8 fertilizer. That's pretty good for tomatoes. Too much nitrogen will just produce lots of leaves, and you don't want that. So now you're feeding this about every 2 weeks with a half-strength liquid fertilizer or a liquid feed that's somewhere around a 10-10-10. That will take care of your tomato without excessive leaf growth. Now, you have tomatoes forming, and I showed you the tomato that had the blossom end rot. If you want to do a side dressing, in a container this size, I would use about, this is an 8-ounce cup. The lime goes all the way around it, 6 ounces maybe. Just scratch it in. Every time you water now, some lime and calcium are going to go into the root system. And the reason that you do this, and I've talked about it before, is tomato plants really suck the life out of the soil. So you want to keep the calcium in, you want to keep the fertilizer in. You also are feeding them more often because when it rains or you water and the water goes through and pours out, you're kind of leaching away the nutrients. So you want to keep everything fed up. See if I can open this without scissors. This is a 646 fertilizer. First time using it actually, and it's pelleted more like alfalfa pellets. But I would scratch this right into the surface, about 2 tablespoons. This is an organic, slow release, and that will swell up with moisture. It will slowly, leach into the soil and provide some nice, slow release fertilizer over the rest of the season. But you're still feeding this the chemical fertilizers. And again, I'm perfectly fine with using a chemical fertilizer. It does not 100% hurt your plant in any way. It's not poisonous, it's not bad, and I want to say that because some gardeners, organic farmers, will scare you thinking that if you use this product or chemical fertilizers, you're doing something wrong. You're not. Use what works. And this is very, very effective. So I would just, take my 2-gallon container, put in a half-strength mix of the all-purpose fertilizer, and I don't have it with me, but also at this point I would be putting in some Epsom salt, and that would be 1 tablespoon per gallon. That's all going in there. And the reason I'm doing this is if you look at this plant, this is a well-fed young plant. Look at the leaves. All these leaves are getting awful light in color. and that means they need to be fed. So I'm giving them lime, I'm giving them the slow release fertilizer on top, and then I'm giving them the quick feed. Liquid fertilizers are fast acting because of the way that they're formulated. This plant will actually absorb the fertilizer through the leaves and through the root system much more quickly. The fertilizer we put on the top will slowly kind of trickle down into the soil over time. And you also want to keep an eye out. Here's a little caterpillar whoop, it just rolled away, that right there, that I'm sure will be a problem for my tomatoes. So now it's the liquid feed. You're going, when the plant gets to this size, it has fruit on it, that's when, again, you really want to do the side dressings or the top dressings. You want to make sure you get them a liquid fertilizer. The lime is in there because you don't want to get blossom end rot, so you're really good to go along that respect. At this point too, you want to be inspecting your leaves. That's leaf spot right there. And you can tell it's little brown spots and a yellowing around them. These plants have been treated. I'll talk about that in another video. But just to give you some idea, come this stage of growth, when the plant's 2 feet, 3 feet high, you really want to put the side dressing in. You really want to make sure you get the fertilizer going in. And you can really use whatever products you want. Just get the timing down like I was just talking about. You know, set it up when the plants go in. When the plants are smaller this size, you don't need to be feeding them every 10 days or every 2 weeks because they're too small. As they get bigger, increase the feeding with the liquid fertilizer. You want to keep the liquid feed somewhere around the numbers of 10, 10, 10. You don't want a lot of nitrogen going into the plants when they're this big, or you'll get too much leaf growth. These principles should help you be successful at growing tomatoes in containers. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out my blog at www.theroastedgarden.blogspot.com and also check out my YouTube videos. Thanks.